Everybody knows Audie Murphy, but far fewer people know about Matt Urban, a man who has a real argument for being one of the most decorated American soldiers of World War II. And once you hear his story, you'll understand why they called him the Ghost. Matt Urban earned 7 Purple Hearts, the Medal of Honor, the Legion of Merit, 2 Silver Stars, 3 Bronze Stars with Valor, and multiple foreign awards. He survived wound after wound, escaped hospitals more than once to get back to his men, and built a reputation for being almost impossible to kill. At one point, he was so badly wounded that a priest gave him last rites on the battlefield. Doctors believed he was going to die. He didn't. Instead, he recovered, escaped a hospital in England, crossed the Channel, and made his way back to the front lines in Europe to rejoin his men. That alone would make him memorable. But that was only part of the story. Matt Urban was born on August 25, 1919 in Buffalo, New York. He came from a hardworking family, went to Cornell University, ran cross-country, boxed, and worked multiple jobs to pay his tuition. And in boxing, he wasn't just good, he was exceptional. He fought in multiple weight classes, from 165 pounds all the way up to heavyweight, and became known for his endurance, toughness, and ability to fight from either stance. By the time he graduated in 1941, it was obvious America was headed toward war, so he joined the ROTC program, earned his commission, and became an infantry officer in the 9th Infantry Division. Even before combat, Urban had a reputation for doing more than his share. He trained soldiers during the day and volunteered as a morale officer, organizing athletics and boxing at night. Then came Pearl Harbor. From that moment on, training intensified, and before long, Urban and his men were heading overseas. In 1942, they boarded a ship without even being told where they were going. Morale dropped fast. The men were frustrated, the enlisted were resenting the officers, and the tension was getting worse by the day. So Urban did what he always did when morale was low. He improvised. He built a boxing ring on the deck of the ship and let the men fight it out. It worked. Spirits went up immediately, but eventually one enlisted heavyweight named Al Shellbach started beating everyone. Then Shellbach challenged an officer. Urban accepted. The two of them went at it in front of the whole ship, and when it ended in a draw, Urban instantly earned the respect of the enlisted men. He and Shellbach became close friends, which matters because soon the two of them would do something completely ridiculous together. Their destination turned out to be North Africa for Operation Torch. Urban's unit was supposed to land near Port Lyautey, but Urban himself had been ordered to stay on the ship because he was the morale officer. The idea was that he'd be more useful after the fighting. Urban did not agree. So he and Shellbach grabbed a raft, weapons, and supplies, lowered themselves over the side of the ship, and rowed toward the invasion on their own while the battle was already underway. By the time they reached the beach, the landing was chaos. Casualties were everywhere. Urban pushed inland, linked up with his men, and during the fighting he charged enemy fortifications, wiped out multiple machine gun positions, and helped break the resistance around the French-held fort they were attacking. That was the beginning. In Tunisia, Urban and the 9th Infantry Division were rushed hundreds of miles through the desert to help stop German forces near the Kasserine Pass. The Germans had better artillery, better tanks, and more combat experience. Urban's men were under shell fire for days. They held. Later in the Tunisian campaign, Urban kept stacking up stories that sounded almost made up. He led dangerous patrols, attacked strong points, and repeatedly took the initiative when the situation looked bad. On one occasion, he followed a local irregular fighter through rough terrain, found what appeared to be a key German communication site, and destroyed it almost single-handedly before sprinting back through enemy fire. Then came Hill 409. Urban's battalion had to take a heavily defended height held by a much larger German force. He scouted the position, noticed the defenders rotated and left key gun positions vulnerable around lunchtime, and planned an assault around that small opening. The attack worked. His men seized the position and then had to hold it against repeated counterattacks while surrounded, short on food, water, and ammunition. At one point, the Germans even tried to trick American troops into retreating by shouting false orders in English through the fog. Urban tracked down the source of the deception, eliminated it, rallied his men, and helped hold the line until the Germans broke off. By the end of the North African campaign, Urban already looked like a legend in the making. Then came Sicily. During a German air attack, an anti-aircraft gunner near Urban was killed. Urban took over the gun and reportedly shot down a dive bomber himself. Once ashore in Sicily, the campaign moved quickly. The men spent long stretches marching, and Urban often wore a wool blanket draped over his helmet and shoulders in the cold. That image stuck with the men. They started calling him the Ghost. At first, it was a joke about how he looked. Later, it became something else entirely. After Sicily, Urban went to England, where he again worked on morale and boxing programs while preparing for the invasion of Europe. He was promoted, decorated, and put back to work getting soldiers ready. Then, after D-Day, his unit landed in Normandy on Utah Beach on June 11, 1944, a few days after the initial landings. That's where the legend of Matt Urban truly exploded. In the hedgerows of Normandy, his unit came under attack from German armor. Urban grabbed a bazooka and knocked out 2 German tanks himself. Then a third tank opened fire and hit near him, tearing apart his leg. Most people would have been finished right there. Urban refused morphine, refused evacuation at first, and kept directing the fight while lying on a litter. Eventually, he was sent back to England to recover. That should have been the end of his frontline service. It wasn't. While in the hospital, Urban started hearing reports that his old unit was taking heavy losses. He couldn't stand it. He found a group of disciplinary problem soldiers assigned to grunt work, took over their training, and convinced the chain of command to let him escort them back to Normandy. Once he landed, he handed the men off as ordered. Then, instead of returning to the hospital, he found transportation to the front. He arrived during an active battle near St. Lo, found confused troops under heavy fire with no clear leadership, and immediately took charge. With only a cane and sheer nerve, he reorganized the men, got them moving, and then ran through enemy fire to reach a disabled tank. He climbed onto it, manned the machine gun, and used it to lay down fire while the tank crew got back in action. The stalled attack turned around. His battalion commander recommended him for the Medal of Honor. And still, Urban wasn't done. Over the next days and weeks, he continued leading from the front, taking more wounds and refusing evacuation more than once. By now, his men fully believed what they had started joking about in Sicily. He really was the ghost. He'd already been nearly killed, shipped away, and somehow come back. Then came one of the most brutal moments of the war for him. In September 1944, during fighting near Philippsbourg, Urban's battalion was loaned out to another division for a difficult attack. He objected to a reckless plan that would have sent men forward without proper support, and when pressed, he refused to throw them away. That decision likely saved lives. Once artillery support was finally arranged, Urban led the assault himself. During the fight, he attacked enemy machine gun positions with grenades and was hit by a bullet in the neck. He went down hard. His men saw him bleeding badly. A priest came to his side. A doctor reportedly believed he would not survive. Urban received last rites on the battlefield and was sent to the rear, classified as essentially beyond saving. But again, he didn't die. He lingered, survived, and was eventually sent back to England. His vocal cords were badly damaged. He could barely communicate except by writing. He still wanted to return to combat. And once again, he was told no. So once again, he took matters into his own hands. He secured leave, got on a flight across the channel, and hitchhiked his way back to his unit. Imagine being one of his men. You watched this guy get hit in the neck. You saw him carried off, you heard the priest, you assumed he was gone. And then one day a vehicle pulls up, and Matt Urban steps out. That's when the nickname became permanent. Not because of the blanket in Sicily, because the men genuinely felt like they were looking at someone who had come back from the dead. Eventually, the army did force him out of frontline combat and sent him home. He had done enough for several lifetimes. After the war, Urban returned to civilian life, worked with young athletes, coached, mentored kids, and lived far more quietly than you'd expect for someone with his combat record. For years, he never got the full recognition many believed he deserved. His Medal of Honor recommendation had been lost in the bureaucracy. Then, in the late 1970s, friends and former comrades pushed for the case to be reviewed. This was difficult because a 1973 fire at the National Personnel Records Center had destroyed huge numbers of military files, but one surviving box of records contained the recommendation for Matt Urban's Medal of Honor. That, combined with witness testimony, finally corrected the record. In 1980, President Jimmy Carter presented Matt Urban with the Medal of Honor. By that point, Urban was already one of the most decorated American soldiers of World War II. The medal simply made official what the men who served with him had known for decades. Matt Urban was one of the toughest, bravest, most relentlessly committed infantry officers America produced in the entire war. He wasn't fighting for medals, he was fighting for his men. And that's exactly why they never forgot him. If Audie Murphy is the name everybody knows, Matt Urban is one of the names more people should. Because the ghost wasn't just hard to kill. He was the kind of leader who kept coming back.